Motorcycles can make legends, but they can also break them. Behind the scenes of every sleek superbike or roaring cruiser, there are corporate boardrooms gambling millions on designs, technologies, and trends. Sometimes those bets pay off. Other times, they nearly destroy the companies that made them. Throughout history, even the biggest motorcycle brands, Harley-Davidson, Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, and others, have rolled the dice on risky projects. Whether it was chasing futuristic designs that nobody wanted, building over-engineered machines too expensive to sell, or releasing bikes that flopped so hard they left warehouses full of unsold inventory, these models became costly mistakes. In this countdown, we'll uncover 14 motorcycles that almost bankrupted big brands. From bold experiments gone wrong to financial disasters that dragged entire companies to the brink. These are the bikes that remind us innovation is never without risk. Number 14. Honda DN01. When Honda launched the DN01 in 2008, it wasn't just selling a motorcycle, it was selling a vision of the future. With its futuristic design, scooter-like transmission, and cruiser-inspired stance, the DN01 was supposed to attract a new generation of riders who wanted practicality with flair. Instead, it turned into one of Honda's most expensive flops, nearly staining the brand's reputation for innovation. The DN01's identity crisis was its first problem. Honda billed it as a hybrid of cruiser, scooter, and sport bike, but it didn't excel in any of those categories. At nearly 600 pounds, it was too heavy and sluggish to compete with sporty machines. It lacked the storage, practicality, and affordability of a scooter. And as a cruiser, it simply wasn't comfortable for long distances. Riders were left scratching their heads. What exactly was this thing supposed to be? Performance was equally underwhelming. The DN01 featured a 680 cubic centimeter V-twin paired with Honda's human-friendly transmission, essentially a continuously variable automatic transmission, CVT. While the idea of an easy twist-and-go motorcycle was appealing in theory, in practice it felt dull. Riders missed the engagement of shifting gears, while newcomers found the sluggish acceleration disappointing. Instead of combining the best of all worlds, it felt like a compromise that satisfied no one. Then came the price tag. At nearly $15,000, the DN01 cost as much as premium touring or sport models that actually delivered proven performance. Buyers couldn't justify spending that much money on a machine with such an uncertain identity. Honda had gambled that futuristic design would offset the shortcomings, but the gamble didn't pay off. Sales were dismal. In both the US and Europe, showrooms struggled to move units. Dealers were left discounting heavily just to clear stock, and unsold DN01s sat gathering dust. For a company as large as Honda, the DN01 didn't cause bankruptcy, but it was a costly lesson. Development, marketing, and production all drained resources without generating the returns Honda had hoped for. Today, the DN01 is remembered as a curiosity, a bike that looked ahead of its time but fell flat in execution. It didn't ruin Honda, but it stands as a reminder that even the most reliable motorcycle brand in the world can misread the market badly. For riders, it became a bike to regret. For Honda, it became a financial misstep that almost made them question whether chasing radical innovation was worth the risk. Number 13. Harley-Davidson V-Rod. When Harley-Davidson introduced the V-Rod in 2001, It was meant to be a revolution. Developed in partnership with Porsche, the V-Rod's liquid-cooled Revolution engine broke from Harley tradition, revving higher, producing more horsepower, and giving the brand a shot at appealing to younger riders who preferred performance over nostalgia. On paper, it was Harley's boldest move in decades. In reality, it became one of the most divisive motorcycles in the company's history, a gamble that cost Harley millions and almost shook its financial foundation. The V-Rod's biggest problem was identity. Traditional Harley loyalists saw it as a betrayal. It didn't sound, feel, or look like the classic air-cooled V-twins they loved. The engine, while powerful at 115 horsepower, lacked the signature low-end grunt Harley riders lived for. For them, the V-Rod wasn't a real Harley. At the same time, younger riders, the audience Harley hoped to capture, weren't convinced either. They preferred lighter, cheaper, and faster Japanese or European machines that didn't come with Harley's premium price tag. Ergonomics didn't help. With its stretched-out riding position, the V-Rod looked aggressive, but often left riders uncomfortable on longer journeys. Add in a small gas tank and poor range, and the bike quickly lost appeal as a practical cruiser. It was a machine caught between worlds, too radical for Harley traditionalists, too heavy and expensive for sport bike fans. Financially, the V-Rod was a headache. Harley poured enormous sums into its development and marketing, betting big that it would expand the brand into new markets. Instead, sales lagged far below expectations. Dealers struggled to move inventory, and Harley had to spend years propping up a model that was never truly embraced. The failure of the V-Rod didn't bankrupt Harley outright, but it compounded financial woes during the late 2000s recession, when motorcycle sales across the board were already tanking. The V-Rod limped along until 2017 before Harley quietly pulled the plug. By then, it had become a symbol of what happens when a brand strays too far from its identity. Today, the V-Rod has a small cult following among custom builders and collectors, but it's remembered more as a cautionary tale than a triumph. For Harley-Davidson, it was a bruising reminder that innovation without alignment to brand identity can be as dangerous as standing still. Number 12. Suzuki RE5 Rotary. In the mid-1970s, rotary engines were the talk of the automotive world. Mazda had found success with its Wankel-powered cars, and Suzuki believed it could bring that same futuristic technology to motorcycles. The result was the Suzuki RE5 Rotary, launched in 1974, a bold experiment that nearly dragged the company into financial disaster. At first glance, the RE5 looked promising. Powered by a 497 cubic centimeter single-rotor engine, it promised smooth power delivery and fewer moving parts than a traditional piston engine. Suzuki invested heavily in development, convinced that the Rotary would become the future of motorcycling. They even brought in Giorgetto Giugiaro, one of the most famous automotive designers in the world, to pen its futuristic styling. Suzuki spared no expense, betting big that the RE5 would redefine performance. But reality was cruel. Rotary engines ran hot, and the RE5 was no exception. Riders complained about excessive heat near their legs and unreliable cooling. Fuel economy was abysmal, especially during the 1970s oil crisis, when riders desperately wanted efficiency. Worse, the bike was heavy, nearly 600 pounds, making it clumsy compared to more nimble Japanese rivals. Then came the maintenance nightmares. The RE5's rotary engine was unfamiliar to most mechanics, and servicing it was expensive and time-consuming. Riders who expected Suzuki's usual bulletproof reliability were shocked at how temperamental the RE5 could be, and with limited parts availability, small issues often turned into big ones. The final nail in the coffin was price. At launch, the RE5 cost significantly more than proven four-cylinder motorcycles like Honda's CB750. Riders looked at the RE5, scratched their heads at the odd, futuristic styling and complicated instrument cluster, and chose the safer, cheaper option. Suzuki quickly realized they had built a machine nobody really wanted. Sales were disastrous. Dealers were stuck with unsold inventory, and Suzuki had to slash prices to move units. After only 2 years, the RE5 was discontinued in 1976. The company lost millions on research, development, and marketing, a blow that nearly crippled Suzuki's motorcycle division. Today, the RE5 is remembered as one of the boldest failures in motorcycle history. Collectors appreciate its rarity and unique engineering, but at the time, it was a financial anchor that nearly dragged Suzuki under. The RE5 rotary proves a hard truth. Innovation without practicality can be catastrophic. For Suzuki, it was a near-bankruptcy lesson that futuristic ideas don't always translate into real-world success. Number 11. Yamaha GTS 1000. When Yamaha introduced the GTS 1000 in 1993, it wasn't just releasing another sport touring bike. It was trying to revolutionize motorcycle design. The GTS 1000 featured hub center steering instead of traditional telescopic forks, advanced fuel injection, ABS brakes, and even a catalytic converter at a time when most bikes were still running carburetors. It was meant to be the future of motorcycling. Instead, it became one of Yamaha's most expensive financial blunders. The idea behind hub center steering was sound. By separating braking and steering forces, the GTS 1000 promised greater stability and precision, especially under hard braking. But in practice, riders found the system overly complicated, heavy, and lacking the feedback they were used to with conventional forks. Instead of feeling revolutionary, it felt awkward. Then there was the engine. Yamaha borrowed a detuned version of the FZR 1000's Genesis inline 4, limiting it to around 100 horsepower to comply with European licensing restrictions. For a bike packed with futuristic technology, many riders expected blistering performance. Instead, the GTS 1000 felt underwhelming, especially when rivals like Honda's CBR 1000F and Kawasaki's ZX-11 offered more power at lower prices. The final nail was the cost. All that cutting-edge technology didn't come cheap. The GTS 1000 sold for nearly $12,000 in the US, an astronomical sum for the early 90s. Riders looked at the price tag, compared it to faster and lighter bikes for thousands less, and walked away. Sales were abysmal from the start. Yamaha poured millions into development and marketing, convinced the GTS 1000 would be a game-changer. Instead, dealers were left with unsold inventory gathering dust in showrooms. Production ceased by 1999, and the bike quietly disappeared from Yamaha's lineup, leaving behind financial scars that took years to heal. Today, the GTS 1000 has something of a cult following. Collectors admire its rarity and bold engineering, and hub-center steering fans still point to its innovation. But at the time, it was a commercial failure so severe it nearly derailed Yamaha's momentum in the competitive sport touring market. The GTS 1000 proves that being ahead of your time isn't always a blessing. Yamaha tried to leap into the future, but the market wasn't ready, and the result was a motorcycle that almost bankrupted one of the biggest names in the industry. Number 10. Norton Commando 961. The Norton name carries legendary weight in the motorcycle world. Once a dominant force in racing and a symbol of British engineering, Norton's revival attempts in the 2000s promised to bring back that glory. The Commando 961 was at the heart of this effort, a modern reinterpretation of the classic Commando that had defined Norton in the 1960s and 70s. Unfortunately, instead of saving the brand, the 961 nearly destroyed it. Launched in 2010 under new ownership, the Norton Commando 961 looked the part. With retro styling, classic lines, and an air-cooled parallel twin engine, it blended nostalgia with modern upgrades like fuel injection and improved suspension. On the showroom floor, it was beautiful, a bike that stirred emotions and drew attention. But once customers rode them, the problems became clear. The 961 suffered from reliability issues almost immediately. Oil leaks, electrical failures, and poor build quality plagued early models. Some bikes even failed right out of the dealership, leaving owners furious. For a machine priced at a premium, often over £15,000 in the UK, expectations were sky-high. Riders paying that much for a boutique motorcycle expected at least the reliability of a mass-produced Honda or Yamaha. Instead, they got a machine that felt half-finished. Customer trust eroded quickly. Complaints piled up. Warranties became costly for the company. And word spread that Norton's comeback bike was more trouble than it was worth. Instead of reviving the brand's reputation, the 961 damaged it further. Financial mismanagement made things worse. Norton's leadership, under CEO Stuart Garner, was accused of questionable practices, including misusing pension funds and failing to deliver on customer orders. By 2020, Norton had collapsed into administration, leaving behind unpaid debts, angry customers, and a tarnished legacy. The Commando 961 became a symbol of this collapse. It wasn't just an unreliable motorcycle, it represented broken promises and a failed attempt to resurrect one of Britain's greatest brands. For riders, it was an expensive mistake. For Norton, it was the bike that almost bankrupted them for good. Today, under new ownership by India's TVS Motor Company, Norton is once again trying to rebuild its reputation. Updated versions of the Commando 961 are back in production, with promises of higher quality and improved engineering. But the shadow of the original 961's disastrous run still lingers. The Norton Commando 961 shows how a bike meant to save a company can end up dragging it down instead. What should have been a triumphant comeback nearly became a death sentence for one of motorcycling's most iconic names. Number 9. MV Agusta F4. Few motorcycles have ever turned as many heads as the MV Agusta F4. First released in 1999, it was designed by the legendary Massimo Tamburini, the same man behind the Ducati 916. With its sleek styling, under-seat exhausts, and raw performance, the F4 was instantly hailed as one of the most beautiful motorcycles ever made. It was also meant to save MV Agusta, a storied Italian brand struggling to stay alive. Instead, it nearly bankrupted the company. The F4 was powered by a four-cylinder engine developed with Ferrari engineers, a technical marvel for the time. Early models produced around 126 horsepower, which grew to over 200 horsepower in later versions. Combined with razor-sharp handling, it was a machine built to rival the very best superbikes from Japan and Italy. On the track, the F4 was blisteringly fast, but in showrooms, it quickly became a problem. The issue wasn't performance, it was price. The F4 was marketed as an exotic superbike, often costing 2 to 3 times more than Japanese competitors like the Yamaha R1 or Suzuki GSX-R 1000. While riders admired its looks and pedigree, few could justify the expense. And those who did often found themselves dealing with teething problems. Reliability issues, parts delays, and high maintenance costs made ownership more of a burden than a joy. MV Agusta was also a relatively small company compared to its rivals. Every dollar invested in the F4 was a gamble. When sales failed to meet expectations, financial strain hit hard. The company found itself struggling to cover development costs, and debt piled up. Over the years, ownership of MV Agusta changed hands multiple times, with Harley-Davidson briefly acquiring the brand in 2008 before selling it back amid the global financial crisis. Each time, the F4 remained the centerpiece of the lineup, but it never generated enough revenue to stabilize the company. Despite the financial disaster, the F4 has endured as a design icon. Collectors prize it for its beauty, exclusivity, and racing pedigree. But behind that glamour lies a hard truth. The F4 almost killed MV Agusta. For every rider who dreamed of owning one, there were dozens who admired it from afar but chose a more affordable, reliable alternative. The MV Agusta F4 stands as proof that building a masterpiece isn't enough to save a brand. A company needs volume, reliability, and sustainability, not just beauty and speed. MV Agusta came dangerously close to collapsing under the weight of its ambition, and the F4, despite its brilliance, was at the center of that storm. Number 8. Triumph Rocket 3. When Triumph unveiled the Rocket 3 in 2004, it was meant to be a bold statement. The biggest production motorcycle engine in the world. At 2,294 cubic centimeters, the massive inline 3 dwarfed anything else on the market. Triumph marketed it as a muscle cruiser that could out-torque Harley-Davidson, outshine Japanese rivals, and put the storied British brand firmly back on the global map. On paper, it was a power move. In practice, it nearly sank Triumph financially. The Rocket 3 was certainly impressive. With 140 horsepower and a mind-bending 147 pound-feet of torque, it could launch forward with staggering force. The sheer size of the bike, nearly 800 pounds, gave it presence like no other. Triumph poured millions into development, hoping to create a flagship model that would redefine the brand. But sales never matched the ambition. One of the biggest hurdles was its market position. The Rocket 3 wasn't quite a cruiser, not quite a tourer, and certainly not a sport bike. Its enormous size intimidated casual riders, while die-hard cruiser fans often stuck with Harley-Davidson, whose heritage and dealer network were far stronger. In the US, the most important cruiser market, Triumph struggled to convince Harley loyalists to jump ship. Then there was the price. The Rocket 3 cost significantly more than Japanese cruisers, and, in many cases, Harley's own models. Riders admired its engineering but were hesitant to pay a premium for a bike that lacked the cultural cachet of Harley or the affordability of Yamaha and Kawasaki. The result? Showrooms saw more gawkers than buyers. For Triumph, the financial strain was significant. The Rocket 3 had been a massive investment. Years of development, specialized manufacturing, and global marketing campaigns. When sales didn't take off, the losses mounted. The bike lingered in the lineup, beloved by a small niche of owners, but never achieving the volume needed to justify its existence. By the late 2000s, as the global financial crisis hit, Triumph's gamble on the Rocket 3 looked increasingly like a liability. To Triumph's credit, the Rocket 3 survived and was eventually reimagined as the Rocket 3 R and GT in 2019, lighter, sleeker, and far better received. But in its original form, it was dangerously close to pushing the company into financial ruin. The Triumph Rocket 3 is remembered today as both an engineering marvel and a commercial cautionary tale. It proved that size and power alone can't guarantee success. For Triumph, it was a near-bankruptcy lesson in the dangers of betting everything on a single oversized dream. Number 7. Harley-Davidson Livewire. When Harley-Davidson announced the Livewire in 2019, it was billed as the company's bold leap into the future. An all-electric motorcycle from a brand synonymous with rumbling V-twins was a shocking move. One Harley hoped would attract younger, eco-conscious riders and prove it could innovate beyond tradition. But instead of saving Harley, the Livewire almost pushed it deeper into financial crisis. The Livewire's specs were respectable. A 105-horsepower electric motor powered it from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 3 seconds, and the instant torque made it exhilarating to ride. It featured premium components, Brembo brakes, Showa suspension, and high-end electronics. On the road, most riders agreed it was fun, smooth, and surprisingly capable. The problem wasn't performance, it was everything else. First came the price. At nearly $30,000, the Livewire cost more than Harley's established touring bikes, and far more than electric competitors like Zero motorcycles. For younger riders, the very demographic Harley hoped to capture, the price was laughably out of reach. Combine that with limited range, about 95 miles of highway riding on a full charge, and the Livewire quickly looked impractical for everyday use. Then there was the brand mismatch. Harley's traditional base of older riders had little interest in a quiet, battery-powered machine. To them, the Livewire wasn't a Harley at all. Meanwhile, riders curious about electric motorcycles often leaned toward companies like Zero, which offered cheaper, more practical options. The Livewire ended up in a no-man's land. Too expensive for newcomers, too radical for loyalists. Financially, it was a disaster. Harley invested heavily in research, development, and marketing, betting that the Livewire would secure its future. Instead, sales trickled in. Dealers struggled to move inventory, and Harley's already struggling bottom line took another hit. The company was forced to spin Livewire off into its own sub-brand in 2021, effectively admitting that the project had backfired. For Harley-Davidson, the Livewire became a symbol of its identity crisis. The brand was stuck between clinging to tradition and chasing innovation, and the Livewire exposed just how difficult it was to do both. It didn't bankrupt Harley, but it added financial pressure at a time when the company could least afford it. Today, the Livewire continues under its own banner. with revised models and lower price points. But its rocky start left scars. For many, it remains the bike that highlighted Harley's vulnerabilities, draining resources while failing to deliver the sales boost the company desperately needed. The Harley-Davidson Livewire stands as a reminder that innovation alone isn't enough. Without the right price, audience, and execution, even a bold leap forward can drag a legendary brand dangerously close to the edge. Number 6. Ducati 999. When Ducati unveiled the 999 in 2003, it had the unenviable task of following the 916/996/998 series, a line of bikes that wasn't just successful, but iconic. Designed by Massimo Tamburini, the 916 had been hailed as one of the most beautiful motorcycles ever created, cementing Ducati's place in motorcycling history. The 999, designed by Pierre Terblanche, was supposed to carry that legacy forward. Instead, it nearly bankrupted Ducati's reputation and hurt its finances at a critical time. The 999 wasn't a bad motorcycle mechanically. Powered by the Testastretta L-Twin, it delivered around 124 horsepower in early trims, and later versions pushed past 140. On track, it was fast, agile, and technologically advanced. It even won multiple World Superbike Championships, proving its performance credentials. But none of that mattered, because Ducati's loyal fanbase simply couldn't get past its looks. Styling was the 999's biggest flaw. Gone were the flowing, sensual curves of the 916. In their place were sharp, angular lines, stacked headlights, and a boxy fairing design that many described as awkward, even ugly. For a brand whose identity was tied to Italian style as much as speed, the backlash was immediate and brutal. Ducati fans, dealers, and even journalists lamented the loss of beauty, and sales plummeted. To make matters worse, the 999 was expensive. Ducati priced it as a premium machine, expecting enthusiasts to pay a high price for exclusivity and performance. But when the design failed to inspire, buyers looked elsewhere, often toward cheaper Japanese superbikes like the Yamaha R1 or Suzuki GSX-R 1000, which offered more power and sleeker looks for less money. Ducati's sales took a serious hit during the 999's production run, putting strain on the company's finances. While its track record proved it was an exceptional performer, perception is everything in the motorcycle world. Ducati's decision to radically change the visual DNA of its flagship superbike alienated the very customers it relied on. The backlash was so severe that when the 1098 was introduced in 2007, Ducati deliberately returned to the flowing lines and aesthetic spirit of the 916, effectively admitting the 999 had been a misstep. Today, the 999 has gained something of a cult following, with collectors appreciating its rarity and performance. Some even argue it was unfairly judged in its time. But there's no denying the damage it did when it was new. For Ducati, the 999 was a costly reminder that innovation must be balanced with heritage, and that ignoring customer passion can have devastating financial consequences. The 999 didn't bankrupt Ducati outright, but it came close to pushing the brand into dangerous waters. It's remembered as a bike that, despite winning on the track, nearly lost Ducati the battle in the showroom. Number 5. Polaris Victory Motorcycles. When Polaris launched Victory Motorcycles in 1998, It was supposed to be America's answer to Harley-Davidson. With Polaris's resources and engineering expertise behind it, Victory was designed to steal a slice of the cruiser market and offer riders a modern alternative to Harley's old-school designs. For nearly 2 decades, Victory built respectable machines. But by the mid-2000s, the brand became a financial black hole that almost dragged Polaris down with it. Victory's early models were solid, if uninspired. Bikes like the V92C offered decent performance and reliability, but they lacked the character Harley riders cherished. Polaris improved steadily, producing more stylish cruisers and tourers like the Vegas and Cross Country. These bikes were well built and reviewed positively, but they struggled to stand out in a market dominated by Harley-Davidson's loyal fan base and the massive dealer network that supported it. The company poured millions into marketing and R&D, trying to carve out an identity. But the more they tried, the more it became clear. Victory wasn't winning converts. Sales remained stagnant, and dealers complained about slow turnover. Unlike Harley, Victory lacked heritage, and unlike Japanese brands, it lacked competitive pricing. It existed awkwardly in the middle, not iconic enough to lure Harley fans, not affordable enough to attract newcomers. By the early 2000s, Polaris shifted focus to another acquisition: Indian motorcycles. With its historic name, Indian offered something Victory never had: built-in brand recognition and nostalgic appeal. As Indian gained traction, Polaris quietly let Victory wither. In 2017, Polaris announced it was shutting down Victory entirely. The financial fallout was significant. Polaris had invested nearly 2 decades of money, time, and resources into building Victory, only to abandon it. While Polaris as a whole survived thanks to its ATV and snowmobile divisions, the motorcycle side took a major hit. Dealers were left with unsold stock, and loyal Victory owners suddenly found their brand extinct. Ironically, Victory's failure helped Indian succeed. Many of the technologies and designs developed for Victory found their way into Indian's lineup, giving Polaris a stronger foundation for its second attempt at Harley rivalry. But for the Victory brand itself, the story was one of unfulfilled potential and mounting losses. Today, Victory motorcycles are appreciated by a small but dedicated community, and used models are often praised for their reliability and performance. But for Polaris, the name is a reminder of how even deep pockets can't buy tradition, and how chasing Harley-Davidson head-on nearly bankrupted their motorcycle ambitions. Number 4. Honda Rune. When Honda unveiled the Rune in 2004, it wasn't just releasing a motorcycle, it was making a statement. Based on a concept bike that wowed crowds at motorcycle shows, the Rune was designed as a rolling piece of art, a technological and stylistic showcase meant to demonstrate Honda's engineering prowess. It was unlike anything Honda had built before: futuristic, radical, and dripping with chrome. But what looked like a design triumph ended up being one of the costliest missteps in Honda's history. The Rune was powered by Honda's legendary 1,832 cubic centimeter flat-six engine borrowed from the Goldwing. It was smooth, powerful, and reliable. Performance wasn't the issue. Instead, the problem was the Rune's identity and price. At nearly $27,000 when new, it was one of the most expensive motorcycles Honda had ever sold. That price tag put it in competition with premium Harley-Davidson models and luxury European tourers. Riders willing to spend that much money wanted either Harley heritage or long-haul practicality. The Rune offered neither. Its design, while striking, was polarizing. The stretched proportions, massive front fork, and oversized fenders gave it a presence unlike anything else. But it was more sculpture than motorcycle. Many riders admired it from afar, but couldn't imagine actually riding it. At nearly 900 pounds, it was intimidating at low speeds and awkward in parking lots. The ergonomics weren't suited for long touring, and luggage options were practically non-existent. The Rune was built to be seen, not to be used. For Honda, the financial fallout was severe. Developing the Rune required a huge investment in specialized tooling and unique parts. Unlike most production bikes, it didn't share components with other models, making manufacturing costs sky-high. Sales, however, were tepid at best. Dealers struggled to move units, and many Runes sat unsold for years. While the Rune didn't bankrupt Honda, a company far too large and diverse for one model to sink, it was a stark reminder that even the mightiest brands can misjudge the market. For a company known for practicality and mass appeal, pouring millions into an ultra-expensive, impractical cruiser was a gamble that didn't pay off. Today, the Honda Rune has a cult following. Collectors appreciate its rarity and outlandish design, and pristine examples fetch high prices on the used market. But at the time, it was a commercial flop that nearly undermined Honda's reputation for building sensible, rider-focused machines. The Rune remains one of the boldest and most beautiful failures in motorcycle history. For Honda, it was proof that chasing art and innovation without considering practicality can come dangerously close to financial disaster. Number 3. Buell 1125R. The Buell 1125R was supposed to be a turning point. The bike that proved Buell, Harley-Davidson's sport bike subsidiary, could compete head-to-head with the Japanese and European giants. Released in 2008, it marked the first time Buell abandoned Harley's air-cooled Sportster-derived engines in favor of a liquid-cooled 1,125 cubic centimeter V-twin, built by Austrian company Rotax. On paper, it was everything fans had been asking for. In reality, it became a disaster that nearly dragged Harley down with it. The engine was powerful, producing around 146 horsepower, far more than Buell's older designs, and it gave the bike serious performance credentials. But the delivery was rough. Riders complained about jerky fueling, abrupt throttle response, and unbearable heat pouring off the frame in traffic. At a time when Japanese liter bikes were buttery smooth, the Buell felt raw and unfinished. Styling also split opinions. The 1125R's bulbous fairings and awkward side-mounted radiator pods made it look ungainly compared to sleek competitors like the Yamaha R1 or Ducati 1098. A sport bike's appeal depends as much on its aesthetics as its numbers, and the Buell failed to inspire the same lust. Reliability compounded the issues. Early models suffered from electrical gremlins, clutch problems, and other mechanical failures. For riders paying nearly $12,000, the bike felt like an expensive experiment rather than a polished product. Worse, Buell's limited dealer and parts network meant fixes were slow and frustrating. The timing couldn't have been worse. The 1125R debuted just as the global financial crisis hit, gutting motorcycle sales across the board. Harley-Davidson, already struggling with falling cruiser sales, couldn't afford to subsidize a failing sport bike division. By 2009, Harley announced it was shutting down Buell entirely, writing off millions of dollars in investments. The 1125R, once hailed as Buell's future, became its coffin nail. For Eric Buell, the company's founder, the collapse was heartbreaking. He had poured his passion into building innovative American sport bikes, experimenting with fuel-in-frame designs, underslung exhausts, and unconventional engineering. The 1125R was supposed to prove his vision could succeed on the world stage. Instead, it reinforced the perception that Buell bikes were quirky at best, flawed at worst. Today, the 1125R is remembered as a fascinating failure. Some enthusiasts appreciate its uniqueness and raw power, but most see it as the bike that killed Buell and left Harley-Davidson saddled with a costly embarrassment. For Harley, the lesson was painful. Stepping outside its comfort zone without a clear plan nearly bankrupted both Buell and its parent company. The Buell 1125R stands as a warning to big brands everywhere. Innovation and ambition are necessary, but without refinement, timing, and strong support, even the boldest new direction can end in financial disaster. Number 2. Suzuki TL1000S. In the late 1990s, Suzuki wanted to challenge Ducati's dominance in the V-twin superbike market. Ducati's 916 and its successors were world-renowned, and Suzuki believed it could build a cheaper, more powerful alternative that would appeal to riders hungry for torque and character. The result was the TL1000S, released in 1997. What began with excitement quickly spiraled into one of Suzuki's biggest nightmares. A bike so notorious it nearly damaged the company's reputation and finances. On paper, the TL1000S was promising. Its 996 cubic centimeters liquid-cooled V-twin produced around 125 horsepower, making it one of the most powerful V-twin sport bikes of its era. It was lightweight, aggressively styled, and priced far below Ducati's exotic machines. Suzuki hoped it would attract riders who wanted superbike thrills without the superbike price. The problem was handling. Instead of a traditional rear shock, Suzuki fitted the TL1000S with an experimental rotary rear damper. The idea was innovative. It promised compact packaging and consistent damping performance. But in reality, it was a disaster. Riders reported instability at high speeds, unpredictable handling, and violent tank slappers, sudden oscillations of the handlebars that made the bike frightening to ride. The press quickly nicknamed it the Widowmaker. The situation became so dire that Suzuki had to recall the bike and retrofit steering dampers to control the instability. While this helped, the damage to the TL1000S's reputation was already done. Sales plummeted, insurance rates skyrocketed, and dealers struggled to move inventory. Instead of becoming Ducati's killer rival, the TL1000S became a cautionary tale. Financially, Suzuki absorbed significant losses. The recall was costly, unsold bikes piled up, and the TL1000S's failure cast a shadow over its sibling, the more refined TL1000R, which never fully escaped its predecessor's reputation. For years, Suzuki had to fight off the stigma of building a bike that was fast but dangerously flawed. The timing was also terrible. Just as Suzuki needed a strong presence in the superbike market, the TL1000S debacle pushed buyers toward rivals like Honda's VTR 1000, Yamaha's R1, and of course, Ducati. Instead of gaining ground, Suzuki lost credibility and revenue. Today, the TL1000S has gained a kind of cult status. Enthusiasts who tame its quirks appreciate its raw character and thundering V-twin power. Modified examples with upgraded suspension can even be brilliant machines, but its legacy remains tied to its early flaws. For Suzuki, the TL1000S was more than a failed motorcycle. It was a financial sinkhole and a reputational scar, a reminder that innovation without proper testing can push even a major manufacturer to the brink. Number 1. Excelsior Henderson Super X. In the late 1990s, America was in the middle of a cruiser boom. Harley-Davidson couldn't build bikes fast enough, and riders were waiting months, sometimes years, just to get their hands on one. Seeing an opportunity, two entrepreneurs, Dave and Dan Hanlon, resurrected the long-dead Excelsior Henderson brand and launched the Super X in 1998. Their vision was ambitious: create an all-American cruiser to rival Harley and revive one of motorcycling's most historic names. Instead, the Super X nearly bankrupted everyone involved and became one of the most infamous failures in motorcycle history. On the surface, the Super X had potential. Its styling drew from classic American cruisers, with sweeping fenders, a big V-twin engine, and bold proportions. The bike was marketed as a premium alternative to Harley, something different but still deeply American. Excelsior Henderson built a massive new factory in Minnesota, hired staff, and poured millions into development. Investors bought into the dream, and anticipation was high. But the problems started almost immediately. The Super X's 1,386 cubic centimeters V-twin looked the part, but it was plagued with reliability issues. Early bikes suffered from oil leaks, weak transmissions, and electrical problems. Riders who paid premium prices were left stranded by a machine that felt unfinished. Dealers struggled with warranty claims, and the company's small service network made support difficult. Then there was the price. At around $18,000, the Super X cost as much as, or more than, Harley-Davidson models, yet it lacked Harley's reputation, dealer support, or resale value. Riders who might have considered it often chose to wait for a Harley instead. Financial mismanagement compounded the issues. Excelsior Henderson burned through capital at an alarming rate, with the new factory and marketing campaigns draining resources before sales could catch up. By the end of 1999, only about 1,900 bikes had been sold, far fewer than the company needed to stay afloat. In 2000, just 2 years after its grand debut, Excelsior Henderson filed for bankruptcy, leaving dealers, customers, and investors high and dry. For the Hanlons, it was a dream that turned into a nightmare. For the motorcycle industry, it was a cautionary tale about the risks of reviving historic names without the infrastructure or product quality to back them up. Today, the Super X is a rare collector's item, remembered more for its story than its performance. Enthusiasts admire the ambition, but most agree the company overreached, overpromised, and underdelivered. The Excelsior Henderson Super X stands as the ultimate example of how a single motorcycle can bring down an entire brand. It wasn't just a bad bike. It was a financial disaster that nearly bankrupted everyone who believed in it. Motorcycles can inspire, innovate, and define entire eras, but they can also sink even the biggest brands when ambition outweighs reality. From radical designs to costly flops, these bikes prove that one wrong move can push a company to the brink. In the high-stakes world of motorcycling, success and survival are never guaranteed.